Hey, it's Dan once again. I'm a little sick today. Sorry about that. Um, so my voice might be a little bit off, but anyway, so it is October 4th, which means we're going to get into the next film chronologically in our series, which is Friday the 13th, Part 3, or Friday the 13th 3D, as it's also known. It's the only uh, film in the series to be filmed in 3D. Yes, that's right. Back in the 80s, there was a huge 3D craze for a while, too. It didn't have the same, kind of glasses or anything that they have now, the clear ones. It's a little bit easier to see them with those nowadays, but they actually give me even worse of a headache than the old, red and blue glasses did. One thing that's interesting about this, though, if you pick up the Blu ray or DVD version of this film in the collected edition box set of the first 8 films in the series that were put out by Dimension, you actually have the option of watching it in the 3D format from the time. Now, it doesn't include the 3D glasses. So if you really want to see it in 3D, you'll have to have your own pair of red and blue 3D glasses, which it just so happens I have from the old 3D release of My Bloody Valentine that came out many years back. So I grabbed those, I put those on, and of course I watched the 3D version because when it's available, I don't know, you just have to. Especially the old ones with the, one side is red, one side is blue, and it kind of merges the two images together. It's pretty sweet. It's a lot of fun to watch, just for nostalgia purposes. Now, this is actually, from what I can recall, the very first Friday the 13th movie that I've ever seen. Now, I may have said that I had seen Friday the 13th Part 2 first in the last video. However, I only remember little bits and pieces of it. This one I remembered a whole lot more clearly. So really, I believe this is the first one that I saw the entire film of and can remember from my childhood. And I'm talking young childhood. Back when it first came out on VHS, my father had rented it and decided that he would sit down and watch it, and then he was showing me all of these, death scenes like it was something that I would think was really cool, which really just kind of terrified me, but now I think they're really cool, of course. And this one does have some of the better death scenes in the series. And it still has a few practical effects that were done by Tom Savini, who is one of the single greatest things that has ever happened to horror movies in the history of time. Tom Savini, fantastic, makeup guy, fantastic practical effects guy. Not such a good actor, as is evident in the original Dawn of the Dead, but we'll get to that probably sometime later down the line here this month. Anyway, this film stars Dana Kimmel as the main character, Chris, who started her career doing Kentucky Fried Chicken commercials. And it shows throughout this entire film. But I guess you've got to start somewhere, right? So that's where she started, and that's pretty much where she ended. I don't think she's been in much else that I can recall, anyway. But it picks up just a night after the second one left off. And our killer, Jason Voorhees, decides that he needs a change of clothes, goes out to a, just a little store and kills off the owner and his wife, and then proceeds to change clothes and head out back into the wilderness to kill again. Meanwhile, there are a few teenagers, including Chris and one of her friends who is pregnant, who end up actually throughout the course of the movie, all getting killed naturally, except for Chris. This was actually supposed to be the final film in a trilogy, but for whatever reason, they decided to keep it going, and with the exception of the next film in the series, which will be tomorrow's video, I don't know. Most of them are just really not very good. Part 4 and Part 6 were pretty decent for specific reasons, and I'll get into those down the line as we get into those films. But for now, we're going to focus a bit more on this one. Now, this one, like I said, does have some pretty fantastic death scenes. I mean, there's the, final scene where Chris just lodges an axe into Jason's head right here. That's a lot of fun. Also, she attempts to hang him, and he sort of sits there for a while struggling, and then just it appears as though he's broken his neck. But of course, he still jumps back for another scare, and that's when he gets out of the noose and she lodges the axe in his forehead. And that axe in the forehead scene was supposed to be the death of Jason Voorhees. There wasn't going to be any more. But because this one ended up being so successful and was actually the second most grossing horror film of that year, Poltergeist came out the same year, and that was the only horror film that actually, made more money than Friday the 13th 3D. Also, it's the film that finally beat out E.T. at the box office, which is my very first film that I saw in the theater. Anyway, because of its popularity, they made a fourth one. But getting into some of the death scenes in this, it is actually, okay, so there's a character named Shelley in it. And he's a total nerd, chubby guy, curly hair, and he likes special effects, practical effects makeup, and he's good at it, and he just likes, spooking people out. It's just a fun thing for him to do, I guess. So there's one point where girl opens up the wardrobe in a room, and he just sort of slumps out, and he's laying there with an axe in his forehead, and he falls down apparently dead. And of course, his buddy pokes him or tickles him or something, and he jumps back up, and he's just fine. It was just fake makeup, but it looked good, and it looked convincing, even for something that wasn't actually supposed to be real in the film. It looked great. Let's see, Jason's face when the mask was off looked fantastic. This is the film, by the way, speaking of masks, where Jason dons the hockey mask for the very first time. In one of the scenes, Shelley puts on a hockey mask and is, just walking around to spook this girl, his blind date that he's with, and creeps her out. She gets angry with him. He walks away and walks into a barn, gets his throat slit by Jason. He's out of the picture. Jason grabs the hockey mask, puts it on, and that is the thing that he is most known for from that point on. There's a great kill where there's one of the guys is just really athletic, and he's good at doing handstands and walking around on his hands. So he does that a couple of times in the movie, and there's a point where he's heading back into a bathroom where his girlfriend is taking a shower, and he runs into Jason in the hallway. He's upside down. He kind of looks up. He sees Jason looking down at him, and Jason just slams a machete right down through his crotch and cuts him in half. That's fantastic. Really well done, and kind of hilarious too, for somebody dying. So anyway, yeah, that's about it. Now, that there were some other 3D films that came out right around the same time. There was Jaws Part 3, Jaws 3D, because every third film in a horror series that came out right around this time was a 3D film. So we had Jaws 3D, we had Amityville 3D, and Amityville Part 3, which actually was also the coincidentally the first Amityville film that I saw, with this weird haunted lamp, and that for whatever reason just really creeped me out when I was a kid. A lamp being haunted kind of, the idea sort of frightened me, and I don't know why. Thinking back on it, it's just stupid. But at the time, it was kind of freaky. Despite it being the old 3D with the red and blue glasses, it's got some good 3D scenes in it, and some that are just sort of like thrown out there on purpose. Just someone takes a ball and throws it, and it goes right towards the camera, and so it looks like it's coming out at you. Just stupid things like that. But there are a lot of good kills that utilize it, like when Jason shoots a harpoon at the girl that Shelley had attempted to frighten just a little bit before. It goes straight at the camera and then into her skull, and that was good. Of course, there is one death that they seem to use this over and over and over again at points throughout the series, and all three of the first films have this. The original film, when Kevin Bacon gets killed, he's laying in a bed, and Pamela Voorhees reaches up from underneath the bed, grabs his head, and then shoves a arrow up through the bed and through his neck and out his throat. That's his death in the film. But a very similar death happens in this one. Jason is hiding underneath the bed, grabs a gal's head and shoves a knife, some sort of knife or machete or something, up through her chest. It's really the same thing that was used again, and there was another one similar to that in the second one as well. So all three of these films used that same sort of death, because at the time that the first one came out, that one was really innovative, and they did a lot of hard work making that prosthetic and everything. And it was, Kevin Bacon's fake body with his head just kind of sticking out of it, and he just shoved the arrow up through it, and it looked convincing. It looked pretty fantastic for its time, and because of that, they just sort of used it over and over and over again, which, I don't know, kind of sucks. Anyway, I'll have another film for you tomorrow where this one picks up. After Jason is dead and gets picked up and put on a cart and brought out to the hospital to put in the morgue, there's another movie. So we'll get into Friday the 13th, the clearly not final chapter, tomorrow. Have a good one.